Hello and welcome to another edition of Fide Podcast. My name is Jerry Serino and I'm your host, and I'm here with talent on loan from Rush. So I'm going to start announcing on all my shows for the next month or so that I will be doing a talk for Students for Life at Kent State University, which is just sort of east of Cleveland. And I'm going to be doing that on March 16th at 7 p.m. And I'm going to be giving a pro-life talk for Students for Life. And the reason that I bring that up is not only to promote that, but also to make the point that educating and talking about this issue specifically on college campuses, but certainly everywhere, is very, very important. My guest today is Emily Albrecht. Emily is the Director of Education and Outreach at Equal Rights Institute, and they do the work that you need and I need in the training to be able to effectively communicate our message. Emily, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Jerry. It's my pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you, and a really excellent group. I mean, so you can actually go to equalrightsinstitute.com. I'm actually going to scroll that at the bottom of the screen here so that people who are watching can see that and they can go. But give us an overview of what the Equal Rights Institute is.
So Equal Rights Institute is a national pro-life apologetics organization. We specialize in training pro-life people how to think clearly, reason honestly, and argue persuasively about abortion. In other words, essentially, we believe that truth doesn't change, right? The truth about abortion doesn't change, but culture does. And so that means that the way that Gen Z processes information and thinks through issues is very different than the way that other generations did. And so we want to figure out what the most effective way is to reach today's pro-choice people. And we want to help pro-life people to really understand how pro-choice people think and what kind of arguments are going to be persuasive to them today and how to effectively communicate those arguments and really be able to change hearts and minds in their communities.
Yeah, it's really important because, because making arguments on such a sensitive, which can be a sensitive topic to people get very emotional. In some cases, those that are on the pro-choice side may have had abortions or know somebody and have tremendous maybe guilt, and so they're defensive. And certainly, again, age, impacts how they react. Right? That's just the nature of it. So give me some examples, if you could, of some ways things that we should not do. So maybe some tips for me who will be going in a month or so, what I should not do when I speak to college students.
That's a great question. I think that the number one mistake that I see a lot of pro-life people make when they're having dialogue, and honestly, I think this goes beyond just the abortion issue to a mistake that I see people make when they're talking about controversial issues, is that they don't take the time to really understand the person that they are talking to. It's really, really easy, especially when I do this all the time. I go to college campuses and I do outreach. I've talked to thousands of pro-choice people. It's really easy to assume that the pro-choice person I'm talking to right now is exactly like the last pro-choice person I talked to, or like a stereotypical pro-choice person. And taking the time to really understand what the person in front of me thinks, what their arguments are, what their needs are, what worldview or maybe personal experiences brought them to this position. If I take the time to understand them, it does two things. It brings their wall down and helps them to actually take what you're going to have to say more seriously, because they quite frankly aren't expecting you to care what they think. They're expecting you to just be wanting to push your pro-life agenda on them. And so if you take the time to show you're trying to understand them by asking good clarification questions, by really silencing your inner monologue and showing them through your body language that you're trying to really take in everything that they're saying, they're automatically going to be more intrigued by what you have to say. And then it's also going to enable you to make a more persuasive argument, because you want to be able to make an argument about abortion that's related to the real reason they're pro-choice. If your argument isn't related to what's driving their view, it's not going to land on them nearly as effectively. So it enables you to also be strategically more persuasive in the words that you pick. And what I see pro-life people people often do, or really anyone in political conversations often do, is feel like they have an agenda in the conversation. They have a set of facts, perhaps, or a particular way of argumentation that they want to get across. And if I can just get that out and get it out as quickly as possible, then this person's going to have to change their mind, rather than being willing to take the time to listen and ask those questions and understand, when in the long run, that's what's going to enable you to really have an effective conversation that changes their hearts and their minds.
Yeah, it's really good points. And I just as you're talking like this, I'm in sales, and I do some of what I do is I train people, on sales techniques or how to be good at sales. And the biggest thing we preach and talk about is to listen. Right? It seems like the opposite. You're selling something, and our approach is no. You got to listen and understand what they want and need and what's going on with them. And it's the same thing here, because at the end of the day, we want to sell them on the pro-life side, right?
Exactly.
Not that they're going to turn around that very moment and become pro-life, but it may spark something in them. Certainly. Do you have any memorable engagements with people that either went terribly wrong, or ones that you felt like you put a dent in someone?
Absolutely. I have so many conversations that stick out when you ask that question. But one of my favorite of all time, one that I like to reflect on a lot in my own work, is a girl who I'll call Anna. Anna, I met my sophomore year of college. So I started doing pro-life work my freshman year of college. I was very active throughout with my organization, Equal Rights Institute, and I was working for them part-time during college, and now I work for them full-time post-college. And so I was doing the same style of apologetics back then. And my sophomore year, I was doing an outreach table on my college campus. And what I mean by outreach table is we would set up this table with a question on it: should abortion remain legal in the US? And trust me, students wanted to voice their opinion on that question. So they would come over by the hundreds, literally, and vote in this kind of little poll we had set up with candy on the table. And then we'd engage in conversation with them about what they think. And Anna came up to that table one day in the middle of, I think, February. And she and I had a pretty just standard run-of-the-mill conversation. I probably talked to her for about 20 minutes. She made a pretty classic kind of my body, my choice argument. I said a couple things that sounded pretty intelligent, and then she had to go to class. And that was the end of it. And she didn't change her mind. I didn't really think that I'd made much of an impact. And quite honestly, I completely forgot about that conversation until about a month and a half later, when I got a Facebook message from her. I was not friends with her. I had never talked to her before in my life. I had no idea who she was. And she found me on Facebook, and she messaged me saying, I have to write a paper for a class where I interview someone that I disagree with. And I was wondering if I could interview you. I was like, sure, no problem. Okay. So I went and met her for pizza on the pizza parlor on campus. And we sat down, and she looked at me. She said, I'm sure you don't remember me, but we talked at your outreach table a couple of weeks ago. And I have not been able to stop thinking about that argument you made. And I was like, very taken aback. I was like, what argument I made? I don't even remember what argument I made. And she continued. She said, I do have to write a paper for a class. I didn't make that up. I do want to interview you, but I really asked you to get pizza with me because I have more questions. I was so impacted. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. And I was wondering if we could go over some of those arguments again, because now I'm not sure what I think. And I sat and talked to Anna for the next 2 hours. And at the end of that conversation, I will never forget the look on her face when she sat back in her chair and she said, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I have to be pro-life now. I cannot think of a single thing to say against these arguments you've made. Could you actually go back over that argument about the violinist? Because that was really interesting. And I want to be able to help talk to some of my pro-choice friends. And it'd be helpful if I could remember how you made that argument. So I actually sat there for another hour with her and taught her about pro-life arguments and helped her learn how to effectively argue for the pro-life position. That story is really inspiring to me for a lot of reasons. But I think the biggest reason that she stands out to me is because she is such a representation of the fact that you never know what kind of an impact the conversations you have can have on people. Like, I have had people change their minds about abortion in front of my face before. That happens. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Most of the time, though, people don't change their minds about serious moral issues in a day. Like, that takes a crazy level of humility to do that most people just don't have. I wouldn't change my mind about a serious moral issue in a day. Even if I was proved to be wrong about it, it would take me some time and some personal reflection. And what Anna showed me is that there are so many people that I have had a chance to talk to, that you've had a chance to talk to, that all of us might have in our lives, where we got to say one thing and then we maybe never saw that person again. We didn't get to see what that seed we had planted ultimately was able to do. And God brought Anna back into my life, and I was able to see that what I had said had made such an impact. And it inspires me so much to know how many other people there are out there that I maybe had that really run-of-the-mill conversation with, where they said a really standard argument, I got to say one or two intelligent things, and then the conversation ended. And I never knew what an impact I had actually been able to make on them. And so Anna, I think, really represents to me how important conversations are, even those conversations that you didn't think went all that well. Nothing crazy amazing happened. It still might have been an incredible conversation, and you never know it.
Yeah, wow, that is amazing. I didn't expect that story. Now I have to ask, what is the violin story, or what is the what was that?
Yes. So The Violinist is a very famous pro-choice argument that was first kind of created back in the 1980s by a pro-choice philosopher named Judith Jarvis Thompson. She wrote this paper called A Defense of Abortion. And in that paper, she came up with this hypothetical, this thought experiment that's called The Violinist. And The Violinist just started coming into popularity about 5-ish years ago. So it was written in the 1980s. But for whatever reason, about 5 years ago, it started being read in Philosophy 101 classes all over the country. And primarily the work that I do is on college campuses. I am out doing outreach, training pro-life students how to do outreach on campuses. And so I see the violinist story all the time these days. Most people out in the general public have never heard of it before. But when I work on a college campus, it's a really powerful thought experiment about abortion. And I can talk it through with you if you'd like, but that's kind of what the violinist is.
Yeah, I'm very interested, and I'm thinking people listening would be too. And I maybe feel bad that I didn't know about this, but I guess I just didn't. So yeah, I would love to go through that if you would.
Absolutely, I can. So don't feel badly at all. First of all, most average pro-life people have never heard of The Violinist, which is one of my personal missions in my work at Equal Rights Institute, is to help more people know about the really intelligent pro-choice arguments that exist out there and how to effectively respond to them, because it's really easy to be caught flat-footed. And I felt like I was when I was dropped into college, and I had people in philosophy classes who were reading these kinds of advanced arguments, and I didn't know what to say. So The Violinist is a hypothetical scenario, and it goes like this. I think this is the most effective way to explain it. Imagine that you wake up tomorrow in a hospital bed, and you have no idea how you got there. It's a little scary, right? You look around the hospital room, and you notice that there is this mysterious man lying in the hospital bed next to you. And there is a tube coming out of your side and going into his side. This is getting a little bit weirder, right? So suddenly you wake up, you're noticing all of this. The doctor comes running into the room and says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're awake. Let me explain what happened. You were kidnapped by the Society of Music Lovers. And the man in the bed next to you is a world famous violinist." That's why this whole thing is called The Violinist, okay? So the man in the bed next to you is the world famous violinist. He is dying of a very rare kidney disease that requires him to be hooked up to someone else's kidney for 9 months. You can probably see where this is going now, can't you? So they somehow found out that you were the perfect match for the violinist. And so the Society of Music Lovers kidnapped you, and they brought you here, and they hooked you up to him. And all of that is horribly unjust. I am so sorry. But here is the problem. Now you're kind of stuck, because the violinist is a person with an equal right to life. And if you unplug from the violinist, he will die. Judith Jarvis Thompson, who is the creator of this thought experiment, in her paper back in the 1980s, she invites everybody to agree that you obviously have the legal right to unplug from the violinist. Maybe you're a bad person if you unplug from the violinist, but you have a legal right to refuse to unplug, to not stay plugged in for 9 months to him. And therefore, Thompson would say, you have the legal right to have an abortion because you have the legal right to essentially unplug from this other person who is trying to use your body. The reason this argument is really, really powerful and very persuasive to many pro-choice people is because in this scenario, the personhood, the humanity of the unborn is granted. The unborn fetus is made equivalent to the violinist. And so this idea, this bodily autonomy, right to refuse the use of your body kind of argument is literally sidestepping the question of the humanity of the unborn. It says, even if we assume that the unborn is just as valuable as you and I are, you still have the right to an abortion. And so most pro-life people feel very, very equipped to talk about the biology of the unborn, to talk about the fact that it should be considered a biological human and that it should also be considered like a person with rights like you or I. But a lot of pro-life people aren't equipped to talk about kind of this other category of arguments of what does it mean to have a right to refuse the use of your body when we assume the fetus is a person with rights. It's a really, really powerful kind of argument that a lot of pro-life people are caught flat-footed on, and it's very persuasive to a lot of pro-choice people because it makes a lot of sense. It makes sense that you should be able to unplug from the violinist, and so if that's really analogous to pregnancy, it makes sense that you should have the right to an abortion. And so there's a variety of ways that you can respond to it. I'm happy to go through multiple of those if you would like, but that's kind of what the violinist is in a nutshell. I'll pause there for a second.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I hadn't again, I hadn't heard of it, and I, as you're telling me it, I'm going, that is ridiculous. But I as you finished, I understood what they're saying. They're indicating that it may not be good, it may not be nice, but you have the right to do it. That's what they're saying. So how did you, or what are some ways to overcome that? Because that scenario is certainly unique. As far as arguments that we typically hear, it's my body, my choice. This is healthcare, privacy, and clump of cells. Of course, not true, but whatever.
Yeah,
this is new. So how do you handle that?
Absolutely. So I think there's two primary ways to handle this argument. There's a bunch of other ones. I've heard probably like 6 different attempted responses to this by pro-life people. And I'll go through what I think are the 2 most persuasive for you right now. Okay. The 2 that I have tried and had by far the most success with. I think they're both logically valid and also just effective at helping people understand the difference. So the first one is called the responsibility objection. This is the idea that when you engage in consensual sex, you're engaging in an action that you know might result in the creation of an inherently needy child. And therefore, you owe that child some sort of compensation legally. Minimally, not to kill them. So my classic example, if I come back with another thought experiment of my own, imagine that we have like a vending machine. It basically looks like a Coke soda machine. There's this big red button in the middle. And when you push that button, you get a pleasurable experience. And sometimes a newborn baby pops out of the chute at the bottom. Are you tracking with me? I just like super simplified pregnancy here. All right.
Yeah.
So let's say that there's a man who really wants to get that pleasurable experience, but he really doesn't want a newborn baby to come out of the chute at the bottom. So he comes up to the vending machine. He's kind of deliberating his options. He decides he's willing to roll the dice because he really wants that pleasurable experience. So he pushes the button. He gets his pleasurable experience, and then lo and behold, it is not his lucky day because a newborn baby does pop out of the chute at the bottom. It seems really obvious to everyone I've ever talked to that he can't just leave that newborn there to die. The interesting question is why, though? It's because he pushed the button, right? Like he willingly engaged in an action which he knew might result in the creation of an inherently needy child. And so therefore, he owes that child some sort of compensation. I think he has to either take care of that child himself or minimally provide that child with food and shelter until he's able to transfer that care to someone else. I think those are essentially his options. And that's very different from the violinist scenario. Because in the violinist scenario, you did not willingly engage in an action which you knew might result in the creation of an inherently needy violinist. Like that did not happen.
Right,
there was no like causal and effect relationship of something that you did that caused the violinist to be in this scenario. And so automatically the violinist is not analogous to 99% of cases of pregnancy. However, we know the responsibility objection doesn't cover everything, which is why I don't just leave it there. Often when I'm responding to this, when I respond to this idea on college campuses, when I do philosophy lectures, which is a frequent part of what I do at ERI, I start with the responsibility objection, but then I move to what I think is the more really fundamental problem with abortion. Because Judith Jarvis Thompson was very careful when she crafted the violinist story. She was trying to make it as close to the case of rape as possible. You were kidnapped and you were put in this situation, right? So we can say that the responsibility objection covers 99% of cases, but we still have that lingering question of, do you have the right to refuse the use of your body when you didn't consent to getting in this situation? So by that, I use something called the obligation to not kill approach. So this particular argument versus the responsibility objection argument doesn't bother arguing for when you have an obligation to help someone else, like when you have a responsibility to take care of this inherently needy child. It argues the opposite, that you simply may not kill innocent human beings. You see, there's kind of this disanalogy happening in the options available to you in something like the violinist scenario. So in any case, and sometimes when people make this argument, they'll do a violinist that's a little more real world. So let's make this slightly more real world and help us make sense of it a little bit better. Let's say that you, Jerry, right now were dying of kidney failure. And I was the only person in the whole world capable of donating my kidney to you for whatever weird reason. I think I hypothetically have three options in this scenario. I think I could choose to help you, which would be me donating my kidney to you, which would be super nice. You wouldn't die. Yay, everyone's happy. I could not help you, which would be me refusing to donate my kidney to you. You would die. Very sad, but I shouldn't be legally in trouble for that. Maybe I'm a bad person, but I shouldn't be legally in trouble for refusing to donate my kidney. Or hypothetically, I have this third option. Hypothetically, I could kill you. Like I could just come at you right now with a gun, eliminate your need for my kidney, save me a lot of embarrassment from having said no to you. Like hypothetically, I have that option. But we both know that should not be a legal option on the table for me, right? So my only legal options in this scenario are help or not help. Kill is always wrong, except in weird cases like self-defense. And I think that those three options exist in the violinist scenario, but they don't exist in pregnancy. Pregnancy is way more like, let's say that you have a boat, Jerry. You like get super rich, you have this giant yacht, and as one does if you are super rich and have a giant yacht, you take it out all by yourself into the middle of the ocean on a Saturday to just have the chillest day ever, and it's going to be awesome. You're out there in the middle of the ocean on your yacht, and you discover that there is actually a preschooler on your boat. Like this preschooler had been playing hide and go seek on the docks with his siblings and ran onto a stranger's boat and hid in a closet and then promptly fell asleep. And I have totally babysat preschoolers that would do this, right? So let's say you're out in the middle of the ocean and you discover this preschooler is on your boat. I think in this scenario, you only have two options. I think you can either help that preschooler by allowing the preschooler to be on your boat until you take the boat back to shore, and then you transfer the care of that preschooler to the police. Then you've washed your hands of the situation. I don't think you have any further obligation to that preschooler. Or, hypothetically, you could throw the preschooler overboard. You could kill the preschooler. There actually is no, I just refuse to help the preschooler option. Like that doesn't exist. If it did, it'd be the equivalent of us like Star Trek beaming the preschooler off of your boat and onto shore. So you don't have to deal with the preschooler anymore, and like preschooler's fine. If we had that option, that would be awesome, but we don't. There is no I just refuse to help you option. And that situation is way more analogous to pregnancy, because in pregnancy, there is no I just refuse to help you option. Star Trek beaming the fetus out of the mother's womb and into an artificial womb isn't a thing. If it was, I would love to explore it, but we don't have that technology. So you only have two options: help or kill. And I think killing is always wrong, except in weird cases like self-defense. And so, like, I don't think that people are generally obligated to help other people. I wouldn't normally require someone to donate their kidney to someone else or to donate a pint of blood to someone else. The only time I'm going to require someone to help is when the only other option is intentionally killing an innocent person, because that is off the table. That's the one thing you cannot do. And that is the fundamental problem with abortion. And that requires us oftentimes, when I talk about this on college campuses, to then go talk about what actually happens in an abortion. Most people, even most pro-life people, haven't really wrapped their minds around what actually occurs in abortion procedures, and that it is indisputably killing that is occurring.
Mm-hmm.
It is in the least graphic way either suffocation, lethal injection, or dismemberment of another human. And there's really no way to claim that that is just not helping someone. Like if someone suffocated, lethally injected, or dismembered a toddler, we would never say that you were just not helping the toddler. Like those are all lethal actions against a helpless, innocent person. And that makes this scenario in pregnancy very, very different from the violinist scenario.
Yeah, they're very good. Yeah, and that it makes sense. I was actually, as you were explaining these rebuttals, I was trying to think of ways to, to poke holes in it in what you were saying, and I could see how Anna, who you used that with, it got her thinking. I could see how she was probably trying to poke holes too and couldn't, and then eventually had to say, "All right, I got to talk to this chick who really has made me think here." And that is so awesome. And I think it's further proof that it does take some thinking and some time. And of course, as you said in the beginning, it takes some listening in order to get your message across. And ultimately that takes some training. So if someone were maybe to say, hey, look, I'm not the best at this, or I get emotional when I talk to people because this is killing babies and I get angry, or maybe they're just nervous, but they want to help, what would be their first step to learning how to handle those situations like you did with Anna?
We exist as an organization to help pro-life people have these conversations more effectively. And we are constantly publishing every single week, helping people to effectively learn these tools. So if you go to our website, equalrightsinstitute.com, you're going to find a wide variety of ways that you can get connected with our content. So we have a very large blog where we are constantly publishing dialogue tips and arguments for you to learn. We have a huge YouTube channel, particularly our quick response series on our YouTube channel is extremely popular, where I talk through the 27 most common pro-choice arguments and how to respond to them in under 5 minutes. We also are very active on all of our social media platforms. Our TikTok especially is extremely popular, and we repost those onto Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. So you can be seeing how I respond in little 1-minute snippets to different pro-choice objections. Because literally what I do every day is I take comments from pro-choice people and I turn them into the next day's TikTok. And you will watch me have conversation back and forth with pro-choice people and learn how I respond to different things. If you want a more comprehensive view of pro-life apologetics, all of those places that I've just mentioned, you're going to get little snippets, different arguments. You can look up, how do I respond to this? How do I respond to that? We do have an online course called the Equipped for Life course, which is extremely popular, especially for local pro-life groups, college pro-life groups, county right to life chapters, church pro-life groups. If they want to equip themselves in a really kind of comprehensive way, our Equipped for Life course is this online training course that'll take you from square zero of just, how do I even get someone who is feeling angry about a controversial issue calmed down into a place where we can have a good conversation? How do I set the stage? We go from there all the way through, what are the arguments that the smartest pro-choice philosophers in the world are saying? And how do we think through those? And everything in between. You'll get all of the slogans, all of the smaller things, and then the really big, intelligent things that most pro-choice people have never heard of before. If you want to equip yourself for those, we've got that in there too. So the Equipped for Life course that you can also find on our website is very, very helpful if you want that kind of comprehensive overview of pro-life apologetics and how to really equip yourself for conversation.
Yeah, very cool. And I'm scrolling, for those that are watching, I'm scrolling the website equalrightsinstitute.com. Pretty easy to remember. So equalrightsinstitute.com. And it is, I'm looking to my right. That's why when I look away, I'm looking at my screen that has your website. It is really good. There's a bunch of things on here I need to click on and listen to prior to my March 16th talk at Kent State University, just to equip myself. And if you're looking to be better equipped, or someone you know is looking to be better equipped, definitely go to equalrightsinstitute.com. There's so much content here. Go to all the social media. You said TikTok. I haven't gotten on TikTok, but I know that there's a lot good out there, even on platforms that we're not always fans of. We could use it as you're doing in the right way, and then it is good and effective. So Emily Albrecht, thanks so much for coming on. That was great conversation. I learned a ton from you, and I'm looking forward to learning some more. So thank you for all that you do, all that the Equal Rights Institute does, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jerry. It was an honor to be here today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And thank you. And thank all of you for listening to this episode of Fides Podcast. Please listen to all my different podcasts and all the different podcast apps on YouTube, on Rumble, and on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on rightamericamedia.com. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.